Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you would please open up your textbooks to page 178 and 179. Today we're going to talk about the introduction to the Iliad by Homer. So on page 179, I'm just going to kind of give you a basic background behind the Trojan War, how it all started, how things came to be. Some of the people you might recognize in the video, and there is good reason for that. The movie Troy is obviously based off of the Iliad. And we're going to be watching that, some of the actual movie itself later on when we get closer to the end of the actual story itself. So if you take a look at the background, I'm just going to explain to you how everything came to be. So according to legend, the Trojan War resulted from an argument among the gods. Eris, the goddess of strife, was angry because she had not been invited to the wedding of Peleus, or Peleus, a mortal king, and Thetis, a sea goddess. To get revenge, Eris threw a golden apple labeled "For the Fairest" sound familiar? Into the midst of the wedding guests. A dispute arose when three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, claimed the prize. They all three reached for the prize. So, in order to settle the dispute, they had to basically get someone to judge a beauty contest. So they chose Paris, who was the son of the Trojan king, Priam. Okay, this is Paris, Orlando Bloom, and this is Priam. Paris, the son of the Trojan king, was chosen to decide which of these three, in fact, was the most beautiful. And each goddess offered Paris a bribe, just like any good beauty contest, but he awarded the apple to Aphrodite, goddess of love. So Hera is the queen goddess. Okay, so again, that's Hera. This is Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare, and this is Aphrodite, who is considered to be the goddess of love. Each goddess offered Paris a bribe, but he awarded the apple to Aphrodite, who had promised him Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, and that's Helen right there. Now, the only problem is that Helen is already married to Menelaus. That's him, my wife. So, the king of Sparta, when Paris goes to Sparta, he was staying as a guest to the king. And according to the customs of the time, a host and a guest had a sacred obligation to one another. Paris, ignoring his duty to his host, took Helen. So he actually took Helen. There you go. And they went back to Troy. So that's why she's known as Helen of Troy. She was actually Helen of Sparta, right over here, Sparta, and then came back up to Troy. So, Menelaus, obviously not very happy, as you can tell by his face right here, and his brother Agamemnon, who has been waiting for a chance to smash the Trojan walls down. He hates it because it's something that he can't have. He's the king of all of, they call it Mycenae, which is all of Greece. He's leader of all the Greek forces, and he and Menelaus basically devise a plan, and they're going to take 1,000 ships, give or take, 1,000 ships from Greece all the way to Troy in order to, quote unquote, get Helen back. So that's why Helen is actually known, her epithet, which is basically a long description, which we're going to talk about in a little while, is known as the face that launched 1,000 ships. So, next up. So the siege of Troy. So the Greek forces sailed from Greece all the way to Troy. There they go. And the events recounted in the Iliad take place during the final year of the war. So the poem actually focuses on Achilles. And yes, that is Brad Pitt. The greatest of the Greek warriors. When he was an infant, his goddess mother, Thetis, had held him by the heel and dipped him into the river Styx, in the realm of the dead. Now, after that, Achilles could not be hurt in any part of his body, except for his heel, and he does, however, have a fierce temper, which proves costly to the Greeks. So what ends up happening is that Achilles, even though he's the greatest of the Greek warriors, he is also considered to be vulnerable. So, and you may be asking, like, okay, so if his mother dipped him in the river Styx, why is that one part, that's the only part that's exposed, that's considered mortal? Well, when she dipped him in, you got to remember, a river flows, right? So if you dip somebody, well, I don't know if you do this, but if you dip somebody into the river, you have to hold on. So that's the part that she held on to. Now, don't get into semantics with me. You can talk to me about it on Monday. It's not a problem. But ultimately, Achilles is considered to be the greatest of the Greek warriors. However, his heel is the one vulnerable spot. And the way that we find out about that is from Revelation in the Odyssey and the Aeneid, where they talk about his vulnerability, because Paris ends up shooting an arrow into the Achilles heel of Achilles. I know, it's ironic. And what ends up happening is that it was guided by Apollo, right? The sun god, the son of the god Zeus. Okay, so and Apollo will play a more prominent role, and we're going to talk about that in a couple minutes. So, again, Homer's story begins with a quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon. Okay, so again, Agamemnon is the leader of the Greek forces. Achilles is considered to be the greatest warrior that the Greeks have ever had. He is invincible in battle until that one time when he's not. So what ends up happening next is that Achilles, filled with anger, withdraws from the war. So as a result, the Trojans, led by the brave Hector, are able to drive the Greeks back to their ships. Achilles returns to combat only after his best friend Patroclus has been killed by Hector. Hector, again, is the leader of the Trojan forces. He is the brother of Paris here, and he is the son of Priam. Achilles kills every Trojan in his path until he finally meets Hector in a man-to-man battle outside of the city walls. Okay, so that's going to be later on in Book 22 when we deal with that. Just real quick, go into the next slide. Again, so these are the notes that you would take. So again, with the beauty contest amongst Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena, the beauty contest works in order to find out who is the fairest because of the apple that was rolled in by Eris. Now the gods are too smart for this, and what they end up doing is passing it off until finally the goddesses say, okay, we're going to choose a mortal. So they use Paris of Troy. So he's bribed by Aphrodite's. And again, he is given the most beautiful woman in the world at the time, marriage to Helen. Now, she's already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta, and so begins our 10-year Trojan War. All right, I'm just going to go briefly through some of the gods and goddesses. So we have Zeus, who is the king of all gods, Hera, who is his wife, and yes, his sister. Again, we'll talk about that on Monday. She is the queen of the gods. Athena is the goddess of wisdom and warfare. Aphrodite, and again, these are all listed on, if you go to page 180. So again, I'm just giving you a brief description. You have Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love. Her Roman counterpart is Venus. You have Apollo, his Roman counterpart. Ready? Apollo. And he is the sun god. He is also the archer god, and it's important to know that for what we're going to talk about next. Thetis is, again, she is the mother of Achilles. Okay, she is the mother of Achilles, and she is the part god. She is part god. So that's why Achilles is half man, half god. His father, Peleus, was actually a Greek king. And then you have Hermes. Hermes will not be introduced until much later when we do Book 24 of Achilles and Priam. But Hermes is the messenger god. So sometimes you see his insignia in certain places with like the wings on the hat, and there are also the wings on the feet. In terms of Greeks, all right, you have Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, Agamemnon, leader of all the Greek forces. You have Ajax. Besides being a great toilet cleaner, he is also considered to be one of the better, obviously not the best, but one of the better fighters. You also have Calchas. Calchas is a seer or a prophet who counsels the Greeks in terms of why the gods punish them in certain ways. Next, you have Clytemnestra. She's just referred to in Book 1. You don't have to know too much about her, but that she is Agamemnon's wife. All right, so let's see. So yeah, Clytemnestra is related to Agamemnon. I'm going to change. That's all right. That's fine. Again, Helen, most beautiful woman in the world. Menelaus, the brother of Agamemnon and the husband of Helen. You also have Nestor. Nestor is the wisest of the Greek council. He is trying to settle the dispute between Achilles and Agamemnon, because as we said, it starts with, it's called Rage of Achilles, and it's because of Agamemnon and Achilles fight with one another. Next, we have Odysseus. He is considered to be the greatest of the of the sailors. He is the Greek captain. He is also the one in the Odyssey, which is the continuation that Homer gives us, which is about his journey home back to Pythia. And then finally, Patroclus, again, he is the best friend, BFF, of Achilles, and he is the one who is doomed to an early fate because of Hector's sword. Next up. Next, we have the Trojans. Okay, the Trojans, we have Andromache, who is the wife of Hector. Again, Hector is the leader of the Trojan. There we go. Where is she? Sorry. Hector is the leader of the Trojan forces. Astyanax is their son, so these two are related. Then you have Briseis. Now, Briseis, or Briseis, as she can also be called, is the captured girl who was given to Achilles. She'll have a more prominent role when you start reading Book 1. Chryseis, she is a captured girl given to Agamemnon, and because Agamemnon refuses to give Chryseis back to her father Chryses, it's kind of like, you Latin scholars who know about Cornelius and Cornelia, right? So the daughter was given the father's name with the feminine form. So Chryses was trying to get his daughter Chryseis back from Agamemnon, and because of this, he was turned away, and then he calls upon Apollo to rain down a plague upon the Greeks, and that's where we begin our story. Hecuba is the wife of Priam, who is the Trojan king, and then you have Paris again, and we talked about him. He is one of the Trojan princes who abducts Helen. Now, one of the other things you have to understand is the conventions of the epic. Okay, so we start with what is called an invocation. And if you think about the word invoke, right, it means to bring about or call upon something. And the poem, as the poem opens, now this is on page 182, the Greek army is suffering from a deadly plague. Apollo has sent the plague to punish the Greeks. The god is angry because Agamemnon, the Greek commander, has taken the daughter of Chryses, Apollo's priest, as a war prize. When a prophet reveals the cause of Apollo's anger, Agamemnon reluctantly agrees to give her up. He insists, however, on being given Achilles' war prize as compensation. Achilles feels insulted, and in his fury threatens to kill Agamemnon. The wise Nestor tries to make peace with only partial success. So on Monday, what I'm going to ask you to do is read Book 1 over the weekend, and we're going to talk more about it in terms of the ending. The ending of Book 1 is significant because there's another part that plays into, like I said, the invocation. And I'll talk about that, like I said, on Monday. Now you have the fact that the actual story itself, this epic poem, takes place what's called in medias res, which means in the midst of things, in the middle of. And it's important to know that because, like I said, all the background information that I just gave you has to do with the Trojan War, but we don't really know too much. We don't really know too much else about it because all of it's referred to as the poem goes on. Next up, we have what are called epic similes, and these are examples of epic simile. Epic simile is basically an example given in order to compare a Greek or a Trojan, give them some kind of more description. So, give an example given, that's what e.g. means. A bird will give her fledglings every scrap she comes by and go hungry foraging. That is the case with me. So in this case, the person is saying that, I am basically sticking by my men during the actual fighting. The metrical structure, you don't really have to know too much about that, but other than they use what's called dactylic hexameter, which is 6 stressed syllables per line, and it's done for 2 reasons. It's done to stay consistent with the Greek speech, and it's also conventional. It's easy to follow. Last one we have are called stock epithets. These are descriptions given to the characters to give them more emphasis, to make them more than larger than life characters. All right, so we have Andromache of the ivory white arms, the face that launched 1,000 ships, that's Helen. Achilles the fierce runner, Hector the breaker of horses, Jeff the god of biscuits. All different ones that have description. Next, all right, this is what we're going to, this is the sheet that you're going to complete over the weekend. This is everything that happens. So I'm going to go over this more with you on Monday. So as I said, just read those pages from 182 all the way to 194. It's actually a pretty quick read. There's a few pictures in there and things like that. And if you get stuck, if you're not sure of anything, again, litcharts.com has a really good breakdown for book one. All right, so have a very nice weekend. Enjoy, and I will see you guys on Monday, and thank you for your attention. So at this point, your substitute will now give you the sheets if they haven't done so already. You can complete that. Once you're done with that, just please work on your vocab Unit 12. Make sure that's done by Monday. And again, over the weekends, just make sure that you have your, you start getting your stories for your works cited. That is due Tuesday, and also seeing the actual book with the 5 short stories from your author. That is also due Tuesday. Okay, thanks again. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.